Arthur Schopenhauer did not start as a pessimist. He was not born believing that life is a cruel joke, that morality is a tool for the powerful, or that human existence is a battle in which only the ruthless triumph. He learned this through experience, through betrayal and observation. His journey began like that of many others, full of ambition, curiosity, and unwavering faith in reason. But by the time he formulated his masterpiece, The World as Will and Representation, he had become a philosopher of darkness, a thinker who exposed the brutal and mechanical truth of life. His conclusion was the following: life is not fair, power is not moral, and those who reach the top are rarely the best among us. Schopenhauer's philosophy was not born in an ivory tower. It emerged from the pain of failure and from seeing the world as it truly is. He was supposed to be great. Johanna Schopenhauer, his mother, was a renowned writer, and his father was a successful merchant who expected him to inherit the family business. But from an early age, Schopenhauer saw that the world was not governed by intelligence or justice but by cunning, social influence, and brute force. His father, whom he admired, viewed the world crudely and unfiltered, not through idealism but through harsh reality. The world is not a rational place, and men are not rational beings, wrote Schopenhauer. His father died under mysterious circumstances, either by suicide or accident. His mother, a recognized writer with an influential social circle, rejected her son due to his somber and critical nature. Over time, their relationship became unsustainable, leading to a definitive estrangement. When he finally published his magnum opus, he expected recognition, a place in history, and prestige. Instead, he received silence. He had published his work at the same time as Hegel, a man he despised and who dominated the academic world. Schopenhauer hated Hegel not only for his ideas but because he saw him as the embodiment of the fraud that the world rewards. With an arrogant and disdainful attitude, he openly opposed Hegel, even going so far as to schedule his lectures at the same time as him, convinced that his thought would prevail. But reality was different. While Hegel gathered crowds, Schopenhauer's classroom remained empty. Hegel did not prevail because of the depth of his thought or his intellectual superiority but because he understood the mechanisms of power and knew how to consolidate his influence. Meanwhile, Schopenhauer was marginalized, and his work went unnoticed for years. This exclusion not only affected his career but also shaped his philosophical worldview. His greatest intellectual reward came from his deep study of Eastern philosophical traditions, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism, whose concepts decisively influenced his thought. Schopenhauer understood that human nature is not rational but biological. We are not moral beings seeking justice but organisms driven by a blind and irrational force, which he called the will to live. This will is neither altruistic nor compassionate but an implacable, greedy energy oriented toward survival and domination. Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills, he wrote, pointing out the illusory nature of free will. Every thought that arises in the mind is not a conscious decision but the result of deep impulses and conditioning beyond the individual's control. Those who rise to power are not necessarily the most just but those least constrained by the burden of conscience. The good hesitate, the ruthless act. The good question themselves, the ruthless impose their will. The good desire justice, the ruthless create the rules that ensure they always win. The will to live does not care about justice or goodness. It rewards those who dominate, manipulate, and seize power. But why does this system keep repeating itself? Because the will to live is not only blind but also deceptive. It does not present itself solely as brute force but uses masks, disguising power as virtue, coercion as cooperation, and oppression as necessity. The greatest trick of the will to live is that it convinces even the most ruthless that they are just, that their dominance is justified, and that their success is the result of merit, not manipulation. That is why the most successful tyrants, corporate magnates, and political despots do not see themselves as villains but as inevitable. This illusion does not only exist in the powerful but in all of us. Schopenhauer believed that most people do not act through pure rational thought but through deeply rooted biological impulses. The need to conquer, control, and accumulate are not rational choices but primal instincts disguised as ambition, success, and power. The will to live hides behind ideology, making people believe that their victories are moral, that their selfishness is justified, and that the exploitation of others is simply the way the world works. This is why history repeats itself. Those who gain power believe they were destined to have it, and those who suffer under their rule have been conditioned to accept their fate. Schopenhauer saw human history as a brutal cycle in which the strong always win, not because they are better but because they are willing to do what the weak would not. Despite this, Schopenhauer did not advocate for surrender, nor did he say that we should embrace the will to live and become ruthless. Instead, he warned us to see the game as it is. The world is not governed by principles of justice but by the impulse of will, force, and deception. If you do not understand this, you will always be at the mercy of those who do. You do not have to take Schopenhauer's word for it. History itself is proof. Julius Caesar promised democracy but dismantled the republic to become ruler for life. Napoleon spoke of liberty but crowned himself emperor, refusing to kneel before any king. None of these men were the most moral or the most intelligent. They were the most strategic, the boldest, and the most visionary. They did not see the world as it should be but as it truly was. The most unsettling reality is that the world did not punish these men but rewarded them, because power is not won by those who deserve it but taken by those who understand it. Schopenhauer understood something that most refuse to accept: people do not follow the good, they follow the strong. But history becomes even darker. It is not just that cruel people rise to power but that society helps them do so. Think about this and ask yourself, who writes history? Who controls the narratives that shape our understanding of the world? The victors, the rulers, those who have understood the game. Caesar did not just seize power, he convinced the masses that he was their savior. Napoleon did not take France by brute force, he used charisma, propaganda, and fear to make people beg for his rule. The leader who appears decisive, powerful, and dominant, even if corrupt, will always have followers. The reason is simple: the perception of authority generates obedience. A manipulator who understands human nature and knows how to exploit fear, desire, and ambition will have the ability to control the masses easily. Social psychology demonstrates this. People tend to follow figures who project confidence and power, regardless of their moral integrity. This is the most incredible illusion of all. Those who suffer under power are often the ones who reinforce it the most. History proves this again and again. The French did not just accept Napoleon's rule, they adored him, seeing him as a symbol of stability and greatness. The Romans did not just tolerate Caesar's dictatorship, they hailed him as their savior. Even in modern times, the masses idolize billionaires, corrupt politicians, and ruthless business leaders, not despite their power but precisely because of it. Social psychology suggests that people tend to associate success with competence, confusing domination with greatness. This cognitive bias explains why individuals who accumulate wealth and authority are perceived as worthy of admiration, regardless of the means they use to achieve it. This is why the game is structurally rigged. It is not that morally upright individuals fail to rise, but that the system itself does not favor their ascent. History demonstrates that power structures tend to reward those who operate under different rules, those who prioritize strategic manipulation over ethics. Schopenhauer understood that power does not depend on morality but on perception. And the moment someone stops believing that justice will correct the world's inequalities, they gain a more realistic perspective on the dynamics of power. So, what should we do with this knowledge? Schopenhauer did not advocate the pursuit of power or victory in the social game. His philosophy focused on understanding reality as it is. A man is wise when he does not suffer for what is beyond his control. Schopenhauer believed that the only true escape from this brutal game is to detach from it, to stop pursuing illusions, to stop expecting justice from the world, and to live with clarity instead of deception. Schopenhauer did not teach strategies to obtain power, he taught how to be free, free from illusions, expectations, and the lies that sustain the social order. Because once you understand the nature of the game, they can no longer manipulate you, and those who cannot be governed are the only ones who are truly free. In the preface to his classic work on the genealogy of morals, Nietzsche wrote, "And if the regressive trait lurked in the good man? If he was also a danger, a temptation, a poison, a narcotic, so that the present lived at the expense of the future, perhaps with more comfort and less danger but also in a more petty and narrow way? So that morality itself was to blame that men never achieved the highest possible power and splendor for mankind? So that morality itself was the danger of dangers?" Most people do not question why certain things are considered morally good or bad. Instead, they uncritically and largely unconsciously adopt the prevailing value judgments of their society. For the past 2,000 years, the dominant morality in the West, according to Nietzsche, has been an unnatural morality, a morality that, in his words, turns against the instincts of life. Why does an unnatural morality, a poison that has spread throughout the body of humanity, has come to dominate Western civilization? Throughout history, we have observed the following pattern. Pragmatic and strategic individuals tend to rise while those who rigidly follow moral principles often end up at a disadvantage. To understand why evil triumphs, we must return to Nietzsche, one of the most radical and misunderstood thinkers in history. Most of us grow up with the comforting belief that good always triumphs over evil, that justice prevails, and that if you are honest, kind, and fair, success will follow. It is a beautiful idea, but there is a problem: it is a fairy tale. Nietzsche saw through this lie and called it the morality of slaves. Through the centuries, we have seen how power structures have been redefined through ideologies that favor the containment of strength. A clear example is the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire. While Rome expanded its dominance through conquest and the imposition of its culture, Christianity introduced an opposing ideal: the exaltation of humility, the virtue of suffering, and the condemnation of power as something corrupting. Over time, this new morality not only influenced the fall of the empire but also reshaped Western thought for centuries. Nietzsche identified this phenomenon as a strategy of the powerless to subvert the strength of the powerful, a kind of inversion of values designed to make strength appear as a flaw and weakness as a virtue. As he himself noted, the weakest are in motion, trying to undermine the strong with their morality, dragging them down to their level. Nietzsche rejected the dichotomy between good and evil and replaced it with the opposition between power and weakness. In nature, predators do not feel guilt for exercising their strength, nor do they seek to justify their superiority. Natural selection does not reward kindness but the ability to impose and prevail. The same occurs in human society. Those who rise are those who understand and use power, not those who reject it. Nietzsche called the individual who transcends conventional morality and creates his own values the Übermensch. Instead of accepting the values imposed by society, the superior man establishes his own. In contrast, those who cling to traditional morality, believing that justice and virtue guarantee their security, were described by Nietzsche as the last men, individuals resigned to seeking comfort and conformity. The last men represent the renunciation of ambition and mastery in favor of comfort and security. They do not seek greatness or face struggle but settle for mediocrity and justify their passivity as virtue. Nietzsche portrayed them with irony, making them ask, "What is love? What is longing? What is a star?" The last man asks and blinks. These people trade freedom for security, avoid conflict, and believe that traditional morality will protect them. However, power does not belong to those who play fair but to those who understand and master its rules. In the corporate world, leadership is not achieved by the kindest but by those who understand the dynamics of dominance. In politics, the most honest do not triumph but those who know how to manage public perception. The problem worsens when not only do the powerful rise, but the weak accept their submission. It is not just that they tolerate injustice, but that they desire it. They pursue authority, justify those who exploit them, and prefer to be governed rather than face the uncertainty of freedom. The real tragedy is not only that the strong dominate, but that the weak voluntarily relinquish their autonomy. The repetition of history is partly explained by the human tendency to submit to corrupt leaders, adhere to ideologies without questioning them, and allow others to dictate the rules of the game. Although they claim to act out of morality, many people actually avoid assuming the responsibility of their own power. Nietzsche argued that most deceive themselves about virtue. They do not follow it out of conviction but because they fear the burden that power entails. This is why many repudiate Nietzsche's ideas. Accepting them means admitting that there is no divine justice, no moral safety net, and that goodness does not guarantee reward. Accepting this reality means facing uncertainty without absolute certainties. But Nietzsche did not write for those seeking comfort, he wrote for those willing to hear the truth. In his words, one must still have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star. But if morality is a construct and justice a myth, what prevents the ruthless from exercising absolute domination? If the world belongs to the strong, what place do the others occupy? This is the paradox that paralyzes many, the fear that power corrupts. However, Nietzsche did not see power as a problem in itself but as a neutral force whose value depends on how it is exercised. The superior man does not pursue power for destruction but for creation. His dominance does not arise from cruelty but from the recognition that rejecting power is rejecting life itself. The question is not whether to abandon morality entirely and act with ruthless ambition but whether it is possible to transcend moralistic naivety and understand the true role of power. Strength and strategy are fundamental in a world that is not just. Kindness is not enough, it is necessary to learn to maneuver within power structures, understand the dynamics of influence, and build one's own values instead of uncritically accepting society's dictates. These ideas will therefore seem elitist and unpleasant to the vast majority of people. But for Nietzsche, they were not intended for the masses. Our highest knowledge must, and should, sound like madness and sometimes like a crime when heard without permission by those who are neither predisposed nor predestined for it, he wrote. Nietzsche was deeply concerned with ensuring that the world remained a fertile ground for the growth of true human excellence. Therefore, he wrote only for the superior man, urging them to overcome the temptations of herd morality and instead to walk their own heroic path in life. However, Nietzsche was not optimistic that the future would be favorable for the existence of superior humans. The fact that herd morality continues to dominate should be cause for concern. From another perspective, the slave, despite the innocent facade displayed with their herd morality and calls for equality, does not seek to change the world for the better. Instead, driven by resentment and envy, they seek to gain social and political power with the purpose of causing destruction as compensation for their own impotence, comfort, and failures. As we learn from Arthur Schopenhauer in his work on women, love, and death, man is, at his core, a wild animal, a beast. We know him only tamed, caged in that state called civilization.